Hello viewers, welcome to my channel. The wind over Hope Valley carried a strange kind of warmth that morning. The type that didn't quite belong to any season. It wasn't spring's gentleness, nor summer's heat, nor the dry crispness of autumn. It felt like something else entirely, something charged with anticipation, as if the valley itself was holding its breath. The townspeople had sensed it for days. A quiet hum of expectation echoing through every shop, every porch, every church bench. And now, as 2025 settled deeper into the valley, that hum was turning into a steady pulse of excitement, growing louder with each passing hour. What sparked this sudden shift? Not a single event, but a collection of small, almost unnoticed ripples that began unfolding one after another, while the rest of the world carried on with its usual distractions. Hope Valley was preparing for a chapter it had never truly imagined, one filled with returns, surprises, emotional reckonings, and decisions that could reshape the community in ways no one had foreseen. The first tremor of the day came quietly, in the early hours before the sun had fully risen. The telephone at the mercantile rang an unusual sound for that hour. Ned, still tying the last button of his vest, had rushed over, expecting some supply issue from the city. But instead, he paused as he heard the voice on the other end. His eyebrows lifted, his shoulders straightened, and for a long moment, he forgot to breathe. Only Florence, who had been brewing morning coffee in the back, noticed the change in his expression. When he hung up, he looked as though he had aged backward by 10 years. Florence asked him who it was, but Ned simply smiled in that new, startled way and told her they would all know soon enough. That alone was enough to spread whispers by mid-morning. Meanwhile, Elizabeth stood outside the schoolhouse, waiting for her students to arrive. Her dress fluttered in the strange warm wind as she gazed toward the horizon, lost in a rare moment of stillness. The children soon poured in with their usual enthusiasm, but even they sensed something different. They murmured among themselves about strange sounds, about people they thought they saw riding in the distance, about the way the church bell seemed to echo twice as loudly that morning. Elizabeth tried brushing off the mystique, but the feeling followed her all morning. During arithmetic, during reading hour, even during lunch break, she kept glancing at the door, almost expecting someone to walk in, someone she had not expected to see again. But she couldn't place a name to that feeling, and that unsettled her even more. Across town at the Mountie office, Nathan paced the room with an unusual energy. He had received a confidential telegram just after dawn. Whatever it contained, it had clearly shaken him. He reread it several times, running a hand through his hair, staring at the words as if they might rearrange themselves into a different meaning if he looked hard enough. His horse, Newton, had begun pacing in his stall as well, accusing his rider's unease. Nathan had kept many secrets over the years, some personal, some professional. But this one felt different. This one felt like it could collide with the fragile new peace forming around him. Hope Valley had weathered storms before, but something about this message felt like more than a storm. It felt like the arrival of someone or something that could shift the entire emotional landscape of the town. While the townspeople went about their day, the cafe saw its own kind of unusual movement. Bill Avery had taken a seat in the corner, appearing uncharacteristically serious. He stared into his cup of black coffee as though it held answers he desperately needed. Meanwhile, Minnie and Clara exchanged confused glances. They had never seen him sit without ordering pie. Every time the cafe door opened, Bill's head lifted, and his eyes scanned the newcomer as if searching for someone specific. But no one who entered was the person he seemed to be expecting, eh? A different kind of excitement brewed at the saloon. Lucas, who had recently returned to settle old affairs and rebuild parts of his life, had been poring over a stack of documents. His expression was unreadable, though occasionally softening whenever his gaze drifted toward the window overlooking Main Street. Rumors had been circling for days, rumors about his future, about whether he would remain, whether he might reclaim parts of his old identity, or forge something entirely new. Fiona arrived at the saloon late in the morning, stepping inside with her light stride and bold confidence. But she, too, paused as she noticed the energy in the air. Something was happening, something big. The townsfolk kept glancing over their shoulders, as if the horizon had suddenly become more important than their daily routines. Fiona, curious as ever, leaned over the bar to whisper something to Lucas. But he simply nodded in a distant, thoughtful way, as though he had known this shift was coming long before anyone else sensed it. Just after noon, the second tremor came not from any letter, visitor, or message, but from the sky itself. A distant roll of thunder echoed over the valley, even though no clouds threatened rain. It startled a group of children playing near the church, but they quickly dismissed it, more intrigued than afraid. Rosemary, who had been organizing costumes for the next town performance, stopped mid-sentence as she heard it. Her instincts were rarely wrong, especially when it came to the emotional fabric of Hope Valley. She placed her hand gently on her growing baby bump and whispered, "Something is coming." Lee, carrying a stack of lumber on his shoulder, turned to look at her with concern, but she simply shook her head and assured him she was fine. Yet even he felt the strange shift in the air, the pull of something returning or emerging from the past. By mid-afternoon, the entire town felt tightly coiled, like the moment right before a candle flame flickers out or flares brighter. That was when the third tremor arrived, and unlike the others, this one came with footsteps. The sound of hooves echoed from beyond the ridge, slow at first, then growing louder. The townspeople began stepping out of their shops and homes one by one, drawn by instinct. Conversations faded into silence. Even the birds seemed to pause. Elizabeth, stepping outside the schoolhouse as students packed up their bags, immediately froze. She knew that gait steady, strong, familiar, but it couldn't be. She blinked. But the figure approaching through the dusty road remained as real as the beating of her heart. The rider slowed, then dismounted. As he removed his hat, gasps rippled through the crowd. It wasn't someone they had spoken of recently. It wasn't someone from their long list of expected visitors. It wasn't someone with a history that made them brace for conflict. It was someone whose chapter in Hope Valley had ended so abruptly, so quietly, that many assumed it would remain closed forever. But now he stood there alive. Steady, older, carrying stories in his eyes no one could yet decipher. His return wasn't just a reunion. It was a spark, igniting every whispered conversation into a blaze of speculation. The first person to step forward was Bill Avery, walking with a slow, measured pace. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply stood before the returning figure and extended his hand. The two men exchanged a grip that carried 10 years of unsaid words. The second to step forward was Rosemary, though not without Lee's protective arm hovering at her side. Her expressive eyes widened with excitement and a hint of disbelief. She had always said Hope Valley was a place of miracles, and now it seemed she had been proven right once again. Elizabeth took several steps forward, uncertain of what this return meant for her son, for the fragile peace she had fought so hard to rebuild. Nathan, standing across the road, didn't move, but his expression tightened, and his jaw set in that familiar protective stance. No one knew if this return would reopen old wounds, mend them, or create entirely new ones. But the valley embraced change with open arms, and this was no exception. The returning figure greeted each familiar face with calm recognition, offering small smiles, gentle nods, and quiet apologies where they were long overdue. The weight he carried seemed lighter with each interaction, though the tension around him continued to deepen in a way only Hope Valley could understand. As dusk approached, lanterns were lit all across town, casting warm glows over the wooden houses and dirt road. The air grew still again, but the hum of anticipation had transformed into something more powerful, a collective heartbeat. Later that evening, the townspeople gathered at the saloon, not for celebration, but for conversation. Lucas poured drinks. Bill stayed unusually quiet. Rosemary buzzed around with questions, and even Henry Gowan stood near the back, observing the unfolding dynamics with a discerning eye. He had seen many storms in his lifetime, and something about today felt like the beginning of another. Elizabeth lingered at the doorway, undecided about stepping inside. She knew her life was entering a new chapter, but she wasn't sure how or why. She glanced toward Nathan, who leaned against the railing of the Mountie office, his coat catching the soft lantern glow. He looked torn, concerned, alert, quietly prepared for whatever might come next. The returning figure approached Elizabeth gently. They exchanged words too soft for anyone else to hear. Not emotional declarations, not heavy confessions. Just small fragments of truth that carried the weight of years. Inside the saloon, the crowd slowly shifted from shock to curiosity and finally to acceptance. Hope Valley had long been a place that welcomed new beginnings, even when they arrived unexpectedly. And now, with the